Now I'm unmuted. Okay, good evening or good afternoon or whenever you're listening to this. Hello, everyone. I'm recording Daf Lamed Chet ahead of time because I'm going to be away. So hopefully this will work out. And let's begin today's Daf, which is Daf Lamed Chet Amud Aleph 38a in the Sechet Bava Metzia. Sorry, 1 second. We're going to get it. Okay, so we're going to start at the Mishnah on 3 lines down from the top. Says the Mishnah. So we've been talking about giving over objects, of course, to watch. Says our Mishnah, Hamafkid Peyorei Chaviro. Person who gives produce, to someone else to watch for them, Filu Hein Avudim, even if they seem to be going bad, right? They're getting rotten. Lo Yigabahem. The person you gave it to watch should not touch them. We'll see why. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, no, in fact, you should be mochran b'fnei beitin. You should sell them because they're going to go rotten. They have value now. They won't have value in a week or whatever. But you have to do it in front of beitin, mipnei shu k'meshiv avedan ba'alim, because it's as if you're returning an avedah, a lost object, to this person who otherwise would have lost everything. Because you're selling them, you actually salvage some of the money. That is the Gemara, my time. Why in the world would you not sell them if they're clearly going bad? Amar Rav Kahana, says Rav Kahana, because look, sometimes what you think is going bad is not what the person thinks is going bad. Adam rotzeh b'kav shalom mitisha kabin shel chaviro. Sometimes you'd prefer to have one cup, one measure of your own thing over 9 measures of someone else, meaning even if you could sell these tomatoes and make enough money to buy many more, if by the time he comes back there'll still be one left, that might be preferable for him. So you can't necessarily make a judgment for what that person would want. That's Rav Kahana. But Nachum Bar Yitzchak says it's a whole other problem. And the other problem is that this owner who gave them to you to watch knows that 10 of his, best grapes, whatever, or bushels are in your warehouse. And he might be counting on that for his truma and maaser, meaning he's got 100 bushels in his house. He says, I want to eat this. I'll take off 10 bushels in my shomer's warehouse, and that'll be truma and maaser. And then if you go and sell it, you're selling something as truma and maaser. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, challenge is that you have no idea, right? He didn't give you instructions on what he was doing with these fruits. So you have to worry that he's utilizing the fruits in your watch as truma and maaser. If you sell them, that would be totally inappropriate, selling truma and maaser. So that's the machloket between the two reasons. Metzia. Ask the Gemara on these explanations. We'll see who we're asking on in a second. The Braita says the following: Hamafkid peirot etzel chavero, person who gives fruit to his friend to watch, harei lo yigabem. The watcher should not touch them. Right? You're watching them. You're not there to move them around or sell them. Lefika, and because you're not going to touch them. Again, Ruvain's the owner of the fruit. Shimon's watching them. Because Shimon's not going to touch them, Bal Habayit, which is the owner, Ruvain, can be osel tan truma maser makam acher. He can rely on the fruit that he knows is in Shimon's warehouse, that Shimon's not going to touch, to become maaser from somewhere else. So that's the bright. Now, Bishmal Rav Kahana, I understand according to Rav Kahana, right? It says, Hayan diktani lefika. Right? Because we started off with the principle of you have peyrot, someone else is not going to touch them, therefore you can take truma and maaser, right? And so therefore we said lefika. Once this principle is there, that someone's not going to touch them, then I understand why you can make them into truma and maaser. Ella, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, according to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who said that was the explanation for our Mishnah, right? That our Mishnah said that you cannot sell them, even if they're going bad, right? Because he might make them in truma maaser. My lefika. So what do you mean here when you say lefika, right? We understood that. That is understood. Says, well, that's in fact hachikama. This is what the Braita is saying. Hashta de amor Rabbanan lo nizabein. Since the ton of our Mishnah said you can't sell them, sorry, the ton of the Braita says you can't sell them, the chayshina, because we're worried, pikach. We're chashina, meaning we're worried that someone's going to turn them into truma and maaser. And so since we're worried about that, therefore they said, you're not allowed to sell them. And once they said that, now we know he's never going to sell them. And so since Shimon is never going to sell them, Reuven is now permitted Lefika. Therefore, because Shimon's never going to sell the fruit, Balabait to sell it on Truma Maser Makom Acher. Reuven, the Balabait, can take his produce and say, this is going to be my produce, Tavel, Muram, and I mean the regular, right? And the Truma is going to be Makom Acher on the thing that I have in the Reshut of Shimon that's being watched. Now, Amar Rabba Rabbi Chanan Rabbi Yochanan. Said Rabba Rabbi Chanan Rabbi Yochanan, let me just clarify this whole thing. The Machloket, right? The Machloket in our Mishnah, right? Remember, our Mishnah had two Tanaim, right? One said Tanakama and sorry, I guess scroll up. The Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, right? Says Rabba Rabbi Chanan in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the Machloket between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is Bichdei Chesronam, is if the produce is deteriorating, is getting worse the way you would expect it to. Right? You take tomatoes and you expect tomatoes are going to get worse over 3 weeks or whatever amount of time, right? So therefore, you assume that the owner knows that the fruit I put in Shimon's house is getting worse, but for whatever reason, I can't go back and get it. There it's a machloket. And if they're accelerated rotting, right, meaning we would have expected these to last many weeks, and a day later, all of a sudden, there's mold on them. So the owner would have never known that. Unfortunately, I guess you don't have a phone to pick up and call him. And therefore, Divrei HaKol, everyone would agree, meaning even the Tanakama, that you can sell them. That you can sell these in Beit Din because it's a loss that was unanticipated, and therefore the person who owned it didn't know about it. So now, that's quite a statement. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Vada Pligi. Right? He definitely argues with Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who says that you can't sell them because you're going to make them into Truma Maaser. He might have made them into Truma Maaser not knowing they're going bad. So there's no heter to all of a sudden sell them. But the question is, Rav Kahana Milema Pligi. Does he argue with Rav Kahana? Remember, Rav Kahana said, the first shot, that a person prefers their own produce. That might be true in general, but when your own produce has accelerated rotting, maybe you no longer prefer it. So do you say, Kik Amar Rav Kahana, when Rav Kahana said that the Tanakama holds you can't sell it because you want your own thing, that is Bichdei Chesronan Ka'amar. That's only if they're rotting at a normal rate, right? But if they're rotting or they're getting ruined at an accelerated rate, even the Tanakama would agree that you're allowed to sell them in front of Beit Din. Ask Gemara, is that true? You said, I'd rather have 1 than 9. See, if they're getting very rotten, a person likes anything. Well, it doesn't really mean that a person, you said to them, you can have 1 of your own tomatoes or 9 of someone else's tomatoes, they would choose their own. Guzma ba'alma. Exaggeration, right? There's a limit to how much people like their own thing. So sure, everyone loves to have their own food, but it doesn't mean that they want it even at the cost that's 9 times the cost of loss. So that is the statement of Rabba Rabba Chana. Says the Gemara now, Metzia. So we have, Metzia. How many lines? Somewhere in the middle of the daf. Says the Gemara, Metzia. Near the Tosfot Machloket, I guess, right below that. Says the Breita, right? The Breita says the following: Lefikach. Therefore means, right? We'll see what it's from, but saying because you're not allowed to sell, because Shimon, who's watching the produce, is not allowed to sell. Reuven, the owner, can turn these fruits into Truma Maaser without even knowing, because he can rely on the fact that he gave them to Shimon to watch. Shimon still has them, right? Says Gemara, why aren't you worried? He's going to turn them into Truma Maaser, right? Well, I guess let me do the first question. Maybe they already went down in value, accelerated amount, and Shimon sold them. And now when Reuven says the produce in Shimon's warehouse is Truma, there's no produce in Shimon's warehouse, so there's no Truma. And Reuven's eating tefa. Is Avninu. Shimon already sold them to make money. The Ka'achal Tfalim. And Reuven never took off Truma, right? So he's eating tefa. That's the Gemara. Because remember, according to this interpretation, you can sell them if they're losing a lot of value. Answers the Gemara, it's true, but it's very unlikely. You don't have to worry about that. It's true, it's possible. It's very unlikely that fruits are going to rapidly deteriorate. Says the Gemara, and what happens? Right? So explain, right? If it's found, if you find out, that's mishtakich, if you find out that they're going down in value, right? You then, we said, according to Rabba Rechana, Shimon should sell them, even according to the Tanakhama, in order to make money, so so that Reuven doesn't lose everything. The problem then is maybe Reuven already made them into Truma and Maaser, right? Because since Reuven's allowed to make it into Truma and Maaser, because it's unlikely that you're going to sell it, but then when you did end up selling it, maybe it's already Truma and Maaser. And so now selling it's a problem. Balabait made this into Truma Maser on fruit that's somewhere else. And then when you sell it, you're selling Truma, which of course you're not supposed to do. Just the Gemara, not only you're not supposed to do, you can't sell Truma to Yisrael, you can't eat it, it's Truma. Answers the Gemara, you're right. When you sell these, because nami, the Kohanim, it's made Truma, you can only sell them to Kohanim. You have to assume it might be Truma, because the owner might have turned it into Truma, and you can only sell it the way you can sell Truma, which remember you can sell for a small amount of money, because they don't have a great market, Truma, because only Kohanim can eat it, right? And they can band together and say they're not buying it. But there's some value in Truma, because you can give it to any Kohen you want. Says the Gemara, okay, so now the whole thing seems to be circular, right? According to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who said you can't sell it because it might be Truma, but why don't you sell it to Kohanim, right? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Nami, who said the whole reason that the Tanakhama said you can't sell it is because it might be Truma, but if you can sell Truma to Kohen, is Avninu the Kohanim b'dmei Truma. Why don't you sell it to a Kohen b'dmei Truma, and therefore you should be allowed to sell it. Better than going worthless, right? That's the word b'hapligi. In fact, this is the machlokah between Rabba bar bar Chana and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. The Rabba bar bar Chana Savar, Rabba bar bar Chana holds Yoter Bichdei Chisrona Lo Shchichi Mideh, that it's almost impossible. Lo Shchichi Mideh means it's very unlikely that fruits are going to lose their value very quickly. I guess they were farmers, right, agricultural, they knew what they were dealing with, and so it's very unlikely that the fruit will lose its value. And when it does happen, if it does turn out to go down in value, right, which again rarely happens, meaning you see that the fruit is deteriorating, then you assume that likamehu dahavi yater michdei chisrona, right? That before it was going down in value, it was worth more than the amount that it's worth now, right? Because it had not sort of started deteriorating quickly, meaning it was slowly getting worse, like fruit would get over time, and all of a sudden something changed that's very recent, right? Maybe you got a fungus or whatever reason fruit goes bad. So, you can assume that if the owner did turn it into Truma Maser, they probably did it before it went bad. They probably did it before it lost its value. And therefore, when it now has reduced in value more than expected, right, more than you would anticipate, then you can sell it to Kohanim b'dmei Truma. Again, as we said, it's very unlikely. There's a small chance that it happened, that Reuven turned it into Truma, not in the presence of Shimon, not in the presence of the fruit. Shimon is now selling it, but he can sell it to a Kohen as potential Truma, and at least save something, right? But Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who holds you can't sell it, he holds that Yater Michdei Chisronan Mishkach Shchichi, that it's not so uncommon. Mishkach Shchichi again means it's common, but obviously it's not common, but it means it's not so uncommon for fruit to go down in value more than Michdei Chisronan, meaning more than their expected normal loss. And therefore, when you see that happening, it probably started right away. It probably happened as soon as the fruit came to you. It came with the fungus already that was causing it to go down in value. And if we say that you're allowed to sell it, we're worried worried that you, Shimon, who sees this fruit going down in value, are going to sell it third day you get it, let's say, and when the owner then makes it into Truma Maser, he has no way of knowing that Shimon already sold his produce. It turns out that Reuven will eat teva, which is a big prohibition. And so therefore, because Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is more concerned that fruit will go bad, or produce will go down in value, he prohibits you from selling it ever, because even if it goes down a lot more than expected, we're afraid that after the time that Shimon sold it, Reuven will still turn it into tevel, And again, the main machlok, turn it into true Motzaei, and it won't exist. And the main machloket, of course, is how common this is, which seems like an agricultural machloket. But that seems to be their machloket. Continues the Gemara, fine. Metzia, okay? We are up to the last word on the line, I'd say around 12 lines to the bottom. Metzia. What about the following Breita? Breita says, "Mafkid peirot etzel chavero v'hir kivo." Breita expands. You give fruit to your friend to watch. Reuven gives it to Shimon, and it goes rotten. V'hir kivo. It rots. Or yayin, you give wine, v'hir chametz, and it turns into vinegar. Right? It gets rotten or ruined. Shemen, you give oil, v'hi vish. Well, hivish literally usually means that it gets smelly, right? It becomes, and I'm sure we've all had this. You get oil and it sits out or whatever, and it gets this really rancid kind of smell. Dvash, give honey, hidvish, and it becomes ruined as well. Honey becomes ruined if you let it sit for too long. So in all of these cases, says the Breita, Harezeh lo yigabehem. You should not sell them, which seems to be the Tanakam of our Mishnah. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Right, in our Mishnah we didn't have a name. Of course, Rabbi Meir is Stam Mishnah. So this is consistent, similar to the opinion in our Mishnah. The Chachamim omrim, that the Chachamim say, Oseh lahem takana. No, that you should try to help the guy out. Right, Reuven gave this to Shimon to watch. It's not Shimon's problem that it's getting ruined, but you should help him out. Mochran bebeitin, and you should sell them in front of beitin so that it's known that you did it properly. And furthermore, kushehu mochran, when you do sell them, mochran ma'achirim beino mochran ma'atzmo. You should never sell them to yourself. That looks a little too suspicious, right? Like you really wanted this thing that Reuven gave you, and so therefore you said that it's sort of getting rotten, and then you sold it. But we don't really want you to do that because it looks bad. So you should sell them to somebody else and not sell them to yourself. Yod Sebo, and the same idea, of course, of not looking like you're, what do we call it, self-dealing, basically. Gabbai tzedakah. You are a gabbai of tzedakah, right? You oversee the charity. Zman she'ein lahem aniyim lechalek. Right? Let's say there's no one. You have all this money, and remember, money in those days would get bad over time, would wear away. Wasn't stable like our money. So you want to use it quickly. Let's say there's a dry spell. There's a big blizzard. No one's coming for 3 weeks. You're sitting on a lot of coins that are copper coins that are going to get ruined. So you exchange them, right? You exchange them. People need to use them. You have a lot of pennies. You put them in for dollars, and you save the dollars. But says the Breita, if you don't have aniyim to give your money to, you should exchange the money to bigger bills or to more solid like silver or whatever it might be to somebody else, but not yourself. Again, I guess in those days, right, it was always beneficial to have these coins, and it looks like you're maybe crossing a line. Gabbai tamchui, if you are in charge of the tamchui where they actually collect food, right? And again, same thing. If you don't have any people to give it to, any poor people to give it to, you sell it to others, and you save the money for when poor people come, but you shouldn't sell it to yourself. Because again, it looks like maybe you really like this food, and that's why you sort of decided to sell it. So, anyways, that's the Breita. Okay, we are now the first of the wide lines, 3 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Katani Mihad, what we learned in the Breita was that if you have peirot, v'hir kivo, you have peirot and they're rotting. Tanakama, which was Rabbi Meir, said don't sell them. The Chachamim said sell them in front of Beit Din. Now, what's the case? My love, it seems like hir kivo means rotting. Afilu yotem nichnei chisronam. Even if they're rotting more than anticipated. Since we're not necessarily low, it could be the nichnei chisronam. It could be that they're rotting the way you expected. Okay, what about yayin v'hir chametz? What about the other cases? Wine that went bad. Shemen v'hivish that became rancid. Vash v'hidvish, right? By definition, those are yeter nichnei chisronam, right? They're all more than you expect because you never expect your wine to go bad or you'd come pick it up, right? So it must be yoter nichnei chisronam, and clearly there's still a machloket. And right, remember Rabbi Chana said that there was no machloket in yoter nichnei chisronam. Says the Gemara, it's not necessarily the case. Because shani hatam, it's different over there in those cases. The kivan to come, right? Because what happens sort of in those cases is that once something goes from good to bad, it's bad. It's not worth anything anymore, right? Fruit, you sort of watch them getting older and mushier and worse. But wine, it's not that it slowly becomes vinegar. Once it switches, it's no longer good. So basically, you didn't know it was going bad, and as soon as you found out it's bad, it's too late to sell it. You can't get any value anymore of wine. I guess you get value of vinegar, but he can wait and give that to the owner when he comes back. Says the Gemara similarly, shemen b'hivish, when you're talking about oil that's gone smelly, and dvash v'hidvish, or honey that's spoiled, turn the page, so what can you even do with those, right? There's no value. I mean, who wants rancid smelling oil? Doesn't seem like there's any value. Says, and remember there's a machlok about whether you can sell it or not. Answers the Gemara, no, there is some value. Shemen chazil gildai. Shemen oil can be used by the gildai, right? Gildai, if you call it, the tanners, right? So they need oil. It smells. It's not good to use, but I remember tanning doesn't smell very good either, and it helps coat the skins, the hides that they're tanning. And dvash is helpful like tishat the gamli. You can use bad honey that's not edible, maybe infected, I guess, right? I don't know if they knew that, but you can use it to like put on the back of a camel who has like cracks on them, from all the loads. It helps. I guess it's a very moisture, very thick thing. So it has some value. It's very limited, but it has some value. So that's what you would do with it. The Chachamim Omrim, you're getting back to the Breita now, the Chachamim say, Oselahem takana, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to turn them into you're supposed to do a takana for the owner, you're supposed to sell the fruit that's going bad in Beit Din. Says, well, what do you mean takana? What is it? My takanta of it. What does it mean you're making a takana? Like, what's the takana on this? Amar Ravashi, it means the kankanim. It means what you're doing is you're making a takana for them by helping their containers. Because if you have wine that goes bad, it'll ruin the container if it sits there. So by you going and selling the wine or giving away the fruit or selling the fruit, you then get money for that, but you also fix the container that was in so that it doesn't get worse, and that can be returned to its owner. Ask the Gemara, back to the Bright. What's the machloket between Rabbi Meir, Tanakama, and the Chachamim? The Mar Savar, because one opinion, Rabbi Meir's opinion, is that lehefsid mu'aba chashishu, right? That when someone's going to lose a lot of money, then the Chachamim said, okay, you've got to do something about that. But lehefsid mu'at lo chashishu. But if it's going to be a minor loss, then, meaning the damage to the barrel, so that part of it, you don't have to worry, right? And this is really these last cases, right, where you're basically the wine is worthless. So when it says you're selling it, you're not really selling the wine, you're just removing the wine and getting the value of the barrel. So what we're saying here is that hefsid meruba, of course, they cared about. So the hefsid muat lo chashishu, that the small value of the barrel they weren't concerned about. The other opinion is that I feel hefsid muat nami chashishu. They were concerned even about hefsid muat, and therefore, even if the wine is ruined, throw out the wine, keep the barrel, sell the barrel, or maintain it so that the owner will actually get that value. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, and this is again the opinion of our Mishnah, after two dots. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Rashbag Omer, Yimkarem bebeit din, mipnei shu kameshiv avedan leba'alim. Shimon Gamliel says you should sell these fruit that are rotting in Beit Din because it's as if you're returning things that were lost to the owner. Itzma. Says the Gemara. Two dots. The Abba Bar Yaakov Omar Rabbi Yochanan. The Abba Bar Yaakov said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Halachak Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. That's how we pass it. The Rava said in the name of Nachman, Halachak Divrei Chachamim. Then no. Halachak is like the Chachamim, that you don't, the Tanakama, which is we know is Rabbi Meir, that you don't sell something that you were given to watch without authority to sell it. Says Gemara, okay, that's a nice machloket, obviously, between Rav Nachman ultimately and Rabbi Yochanan, but we already know it. Amr Rabbi Yochanan Chadazimna. Rabbi Yochanan already told us, that we're going to see why in a second, that he paskins like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because we've had this many times before. Amr Rabbi Chana, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Kol makom sheshana Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel b'mishnatinu. Whenever we have a quote from Shimon ben Gamliel in a Mishnah, not a Braita, but in a Mishnah, halacha kamoto, we always paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, except for three times. Chutz mi arev, Sidon, V'raya Achrona. Three cases, and we've had these, two of these at least, I guess, recently, not so recently, but we have the case of arev, which is when someone signs up to be a guarantor, who's responsible. Case of Sidon, which we had in Gittin, when we talked about the city, how you go near the city. And Raya Achrona, which is a case which we'll have, which is where the court sort of gives a final deadline. Give all your proofs in the case, and then you find proofs later. What happens there? So, anyways, these are three exceptions, right? But clearly, our Mishnah is not one of the three exceptions. And if our Mishnah is not one of the three exceptions, of course, Rabbi Yochanan says halachas like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Why do you have to say it again? Well, not everyone. Amarai ninu aliv Rabbi Yochanan. There's in fact a sub-machlokas in Rabbi Yochanan whether Rabbi Yochanan holds that the halacha is always like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. There's some Amoraim who say yes, and therefore would be redundant to say we paskin like our Mishnah, because of course we do. But there are other Amoraim who disagree with that, and for them, the one we quoted here was Rabbi Abba bar Rabbi Yaakov. Sorry, he must hold that it's not the case. That halacha is always like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Here it is, and that's why we spoke it out. Now, says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we've had this before as well. We are up to, where are we up to? I don't know how many lines, near Hayorich L'Nichsei, right? Anyways, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, from the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, what is it? I think it's like 20 lines on the top, I'm going to count. From the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we can learn Nishma, we can derive, or we can conclude that the Moridin Karov Nichsei Shavoi. Big topic and machloket, where let's say a person is Shavoi, a person is captive, right? Unfortunately, can relate. So someone is captured. We know they're captive. We don't know if they're ever going to come back. A year passed, 2 years passed. They were on a trip overseas. They never came back. But we don't know that they're not alive. And so the person's fields are running fallow. So what happens? So there's a whole debate about whether a relative can go and work on those fields because they, A, have a vested interest, because if the person dies, they're going to get it. And if the person doesn't die, they'll at least be paid like a worker. We'll see in a second. So Rabbi says the Gemara, from Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's statement in our Mishnah, you can take the fruit and sell them. If they're rotting, we can conclude that a relative can go and start working the field of a person who's a captive, who's missing, basically, and keep the field going and keep some of the money. And essentially, there's no permission. The person left and didn't give permission, but you're trying to save something. It's the same way you're trying to salvage the fruit that's rotting if you're the shomer. That is the Rabbi Midrabanan, who said you can't salvage the fruit. Nishma, I would conclude, the ein moridin karov nechsei shavoi, that a relative cannot go down and start working and keep some of the food in the field of a captive. That's what I mean. Now, how do you know those things are exactly the same as our Mishnah? Dilma, maybe. Ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel hachla. Maybe Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel only said in our Mishnah that you can sell the fruit because if you don't sell it, it's going to be zero. We shouldn't the Karen, the principal, is going to be just wiped out. But if you leave a field, right, the field will go down in value if no one uses it, but it's not going anywhere, right? It's going to stay there. Maybe, over there by the field, you can't necessarily work the field without permission. Maybe the Chachamim only said in our Mishnah that you shouldn't sell the produce because either a person really likes their own produce, Iker of Kahana, that you really like your own thing, Iker of Nachman by Yitzchak, that you're worried about Truma, right? But we're by a field where you don't have those issues, maybe you could go down. So you can't say it's the same thing as our Mishnah. Says Gemara, well, are you saying that there might be different reasons for our Mishnah talking about a shomer with fruit and the other machloket about a captive whose field is laying fallow? But Memra de trade that you're telling me that there's two separate reasons for these two halachot, for our Mishnah and the halacha of Moridin Shavoi v'Nichsei, Moridin relative, what's the word? Moridin Karov v'Nichsei Shavoi. Is it really true? Lememra with the last narrow line, right? Lememra, are you trying to say that there's two different reasons for potentially our Mishnah and this machloket? Memra did trey. I keep losing my place. I apologize. Memra did trey tam. Meaning, are you saying that there are really two reasons for these halachot? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel told us two halachot. One is halachak Reb Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah, that you can sell the produce. The Amar Shmuel, and furthermore, Shmuel was quoted as saying, Moridin karov l'nechsei shavui, that practically speaking, if a person is missing and his field is laying there, a relative who ultimately will inherit him if he dies and will get profit if he doesn't die, is allowed to go down and work on that field. So clearly, the fact that he poskim those two things makes us think that they're one reason, right? Lav mishum dechad tamahu, isn't it because it's the same rationale? Not necessarily, right? Poskim two different halachot. Well, trei tamininu, they might have different rationales, as we just said. Our Mishnah is not necessarily exactly the same as the case of Moridin Karov l'nechsei shavui. Says the Gemara Chanami Mistaver. In fact, it seems likely that there's two separate reasons. And the reason it seems likely is because Amar Rav Nachman, right? Rava was quoted earlier, the name of Rav Nachman is saying in our Mishnah, Halacha K'divrei Chachamim, that you're allowed to sell the produce, right? That you're, take it back, not like Rabbi Meir, that you're not allowed to sell the produce, right? Halacha K'divrei Chachamim, that you can't sell produce that's rotting, so you can't touch the thing you're supposed to be watching. And Rav Nachman separately said, Rav Nachman, Moridin Karov Nechsei Shavui, that if a person is captive, his relative can actually, without permission from the captive, go down and work on his field. So you see, in one case you're allowed to do it, in one case you're not, and Rav Nachman has to be consistent with himself. So clearly there are two separate reasons. Halashma mina, it's pretty obvious. Trei ta'amininu, there are two different rationales, meaning you could possibly like one and not the other, as Rav Nachman did. Shma mina, and this in fact is a conclusive proof that they're not the same thing as our Mishnah. But since we're having such a good time and we started discussing this, let's go back and try to go into more detail of this whole debate of Moridin Karov Nechsei Shavui. Right? So where are we up to? We're at the first word on the fifth of the wide lines. Itmar. Let us discuss this machloket. Shavui shenishpat. Right? You have a person, it's a little bit of a redundancy, right? A captive who's captured, right? So Shavui shenishpat means. So you have a person who unfortunately is non-accessible. Unfortunately, we can relate to this today. Obviously, then it was more concerning and common, more common. Someone is not available, and we don't know yet if they're going to come back, right, or when. So Rav says, Ein Moridin Karov Nechasav. His relatives, and certainly somebody else, cannot go down and work his field. He didn't have permission, they should leave it be. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says, no, Moridin Karov Nechasav. A relative is allowed to go down and work on their property, and we'll see, as I keep saying we're going to see soon that they get to keep a percentage like a sharecropper. Says the Gemara, of course, the Shishama Bosha mate. If there's a rumor, we'll see what that means, that he died, right, that the person who's captive is not alive, then of course, right? Of course, everybody agrees that you heard that the person was captive, you know they were captive, you heard that they were killed, you might turn out to be wrong, you hope you're wrong, but that's what people are saying. So relatives can go down and work on the field, right? Let's say you have no knowledge, you haven't heard anything. So you know the person was captured, you don't know if they're alive or dead. The Rav says, of course you can't go down because the owner never gave you permission, and maybe you're going to, not value the field properly, you're going to be too lazy or too hard on the field, you'll overwork it, you'll underwork it, right? We're really worried. Rashi speaks out that, the person who's working it thinks, oh, my relative's going to come back in a year or two. So I don't need to invest long-term in this field. I'm going to get as much out of it as I can. So you plant, high maintenance or high need crops, get a lot of soybeans, whatever the crop might be, and then by the time the person comes back, you diminish the value of the field. We don't want you to touch it. That's rough. Shmuel says, Moridin. Shmuel says, no, you should allow the relatives to go down and work on the field, because Kivan de Amar Mar, since, as I keep saying, we're about to say, but now as we quote from an opinion later, that a person, who goes down to the fields is Shaimin like Aris. You treat him, you give him value, you get to keep things like a sharecropper, right? Which remember is a third or a quarter. So a Metzia shlish, right, a half or a quarter, a third. So basically, because his payment is dependent on what the field produces, he's going to want to bring value to the field, right? So lo mapsalu, he's not going to cause the owner's field to go down in value. That is the Machloket, Rav, and Shmuel. So we saw Shmuel holds that you do send down, Rav holds you don't. Nachman said we paskin that you do. So all of those halachot. Makes it. I'll ask the Gemara from the following bright. Rabbi Eliezer asked a question from a Breita. The Breita says, Mashmashanem, the pasuk says, pasuk in Shemot, V'chara apiv harak yetzchem. Right? Hashem says, I'm going to get angry. I don't want to go with you. I'm going to get angry, and I will kill you. You make me angry. So I understand if Hashem says someone's going to die, Yodeani shenishotehem almanot. Man who dies leaves his wives, in this case, as widows, and bneihem yitomim, right? And their children will be orphans. So why does the pasuk continue and say, right? Torah says, Hashem says, I will kill you, and your wives will be widows, your children will be orphans, which obviously, Hashem says he's going to kill you, that's going to happen. The Lamed, in fact, what this is telling you is something even worse than that. It's telling you that it will be, your wives will be widows, meaning not only will be permanent widows almost, that they'll hear that you died, they'll want to get remarried, but they're not going to let them because it won't be certain if you died, which is even worse, right? There'll be no certainty, right? The children will say that our father is gone, our father was killed, we at least can go and use his property, and they won't let them, right? And that's referring, of course, to a situation where the father is a captive and is unknown if they're alive or dead, so his wife cannot remarry, his children cannot get his property. So that's the curse. Now, obviously putting that aside, that's not our topic, but you see from this curse that if a person is lost and we don't know, their children can't go down and use their property because that's the curse, right? Your children will not be able to use it. That's not what we mean. We mean, Amarava, your children will be cursed that they can't be lereid v'lim kar. They can't go down and sell it. It's not, right? They can maybe go down according to Shmuel and use it. It just means that they can't go down and sell the property because they don't know if their father's alive or not. There was an actual case in Naharda of a person who was missing, and the question was, can the family go and use the property? Upashta Rav Sheshet mihamatmita. Rav Sheshet said they are not allowed to because of this Mishnah, this Breita, right? This Breita said that Hashem will punish you and your children will be yitomim, and the explanation was they'll be yitomim b'chayei avihem, meaning their father is unknown if he's alive, so they can't go to his field, but they don't know if he's going to come back. And so, based on that Breita, Rav Sheshet said the children can't go down to the field. Asked the Gemara, Amalei Rav Amram, not the Gemara. Rav Amram said to Rav Sheshet, Doma le'reid v'lim kartznan. Maybe the Breita didn't mean that. Maybe it meant that the children can't go down and sell it. But who says the children of a person who is missing can't go down and work the field? Marley, so Rav Sheshet said to Rav Amram, don't let me pumpadita. I have a feeling you come from pumpadita. The ma'ilin pila bekupata machta. Pumpadita, they're very, I wouldn't say sneaky, but they're very midayek. They can put a elephant on the eye of a needle, right? The kofa, in the hole of a mechet, of a needle. Meaning, it's a big tray to say that explanation. Because dumya denishoteim ubneihem katani. Right? It says children are similar to wives. Just like with a wife, the point of a wife is that they can't marry anybody because they don't know if their husband's not alive. Children can't get any benefit because they don't know if their father's dead. Mahatam klalo, just like by the wives, you can't do anything. Afachanami klalo, here too, by the property, it seems like the children can't get anything. So that is the proof that they made in Naharda from this Breita. And it says the Gemara, in fact, when you go into this further, the question, I'm just going to say where we are, it's like 10 lines from the bottom, second to last word on the line. This question of Maridin Karov and Nechsei Shavoy is in fact a machloket Tanaim. In fact, although Rav and Shmuel argued about it, it's really a machloket that goes even earlier. That's a machloket Tanaim, Titanya, as the Breita says in a Tosefta in Ketubot. What does the Breita say? Tanya. Hayoreda Nechsei Shavoy. A person who goes down and starts using the property of a person who's captive, right? Who's missing. Someone goes down. We'll see who this someone is in a second. Says the Breita Ein motziin oto miyado. We don't immediately go and take it back from him. Okay? He went down to work on a field of someone who's missing. You don't kick the person out. We'll see why in a second. The low ode, and not only that, even if you hear, right, he hears, oh, so-and-so is released. He's coming back home. This guy's been working in the field for the last 6 months, for the whole summer, and he is kadam v'talash v'achal. He rushes, and he uproots all the strawberries, and he stuffs them in his mouth, right? So he's kadam v'talash v'achal, harei zeh zariz v'niskar. You view this person who illegally went down into the field as being someone who was quick and benefited, and basically benefited from essentially stealing. We'll see why in a second. And continues the Braita. Where you talk about cases of a shavoi, of a person who's captive, right? Aviv o achiv o echad min hamorishim, right? Someone's father or someone's brother or someone who someone inherits, great-grandfather, whatever the relation might be, and that person, that person goes away to Africa, the shamu behen shamet, and the rumor comes back that they died in that country, right? So in that case, that's where basically there's now property. It's unknown. You haven't proven that the person died. It seems likely that they died. And that's where we said, essentially, it seems where we said that one can go down and work on that property and keep whatever they work. We'll see, it's a percentage where they get to keep, right? Continues the Braita. What about nichsei nitushim, right? Now, nitushim literally means those who are abandoned, right? Not shvuyim, where they went away and we think they died, but hayored the nichsei nitushim. You go down, someone, we'll see what nitush means exactly, but a person abandoned their field, right? And you say, oh, no one's been here for 5 years, I'm going to go work on that field. Then, says the Braita, motziin oto miyado. They kick him out right away. You can't go and steal, even if you're related, someone else's field just because they're not there. Now, what does that mean? Nechasim, of those who are abandoned. That's referring to a case, aviv or achiv or echad min hamorishin, your father, a person's father, their brother, or someone they inherit. They go away to Africa, the safari. 5 years pass, but you don't hear below shamu behem shemi. Right? You haven't heard that that person died. So that's a difference, right? Shavui means there's a rumor out that the person died, and therefore if the children go down and they work the field, that's okay. They're allowed to work the field, and they get to keep whatever they work on, as we said. But if they just heard that the person went away, but not that anything happened to him, the children can't go down, right? So that's implying this halacha, just to be clear, is that a person can go down, a yoresh can go down to the property of a shavui. Right? This Tana seems told that you're allowed to. It says Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Shamati, you know what I heard? Shahanitushim kishvuyim. That I disagree. I heard that it's the same. That nitushim are kishvuyim, right? Now we're assuming that's said sort of backwards, right? Which is that those who are abandoned are the same as those who are captives, right? No. What does that mean? That even in a case where it's abandoned, so you don't know what happened, you basically are allowed to go down and work the field. Just like we said by shvuyim, which said people basically who had a rumor that they were killed. You're allowed to go down and work the field. Says Reb Shimon Gamliel, you're allowed to go down and work the field even if they're just missing. Okay? Hayored. Can you the bright or should we stop? I'm actually going to stop here. So we'll conclude this limud, and today it's God willing Saturday night. We will continue on Sunday from this Hayored L'Nichsei Ritushim, which continues the next subject on the end of Daf Lamed Chet Amud Bet. So thank you. Hopefully this will be clear, and I will see you all on Sunday.